Well, good afternoon, everyone. It is my favorite time of the week where I get to interview an attorney, and I always love to spend time with the attorney. One of my favorite attorneys of all time, attorney Karen Conti. Now, Karen Conti, you probably have seen her on television, heard her on the radio. She's a legal analyst for everything going on in the legal world. There's lots going on. It's the end of the term of the United States Supreme Court. I don't like to give a big bio of my clients. Of my interviewees. If you're interested, it's in the description. Read the description. I don't want to spend time going through it. It's a long bio, so I don't want to spend a lot of time doing that. But welcome to the program, Karen, or Attorney Conti.
Thank you. My bio is long because I've been doing this for 36 years. Oh my gosh!
I saw that. What did you stop when you were 10?
Thank you so much.
We wanted to, as I mentioned, the Supreme Court is out there and they have a lot of big cases coming out with the end of the term. But before we get into that, I like to talk a little bit about your own practice, because I know you've taken big change in your practice lately, and I'm always interested in how that works with attorneys. Tell us a little bit about the change to your practice.
Well, I was practicing in my own little boutique family law firm, and that's what we concentrate our practice in. Just family law, child support, divorce, prenuptial agreements, everything related to families. And I was introduced to a gentleman who does labor and employment, and I had him on my radio show on WGN, and we got along very well, and he was looking for a place to land, and I said, why don't we become partners, and we can kind of service people, in the family and in the workplace. It's kind of a dual thing. And I thought, well, that sounds like a good idea. And we've been together since February, and it's working out really well. It's nice to have another practice group in my law firm.
Well, as you know, I know Attorney Dolan. You had recommended him to me, and he's been on my show. And I listened to him on Let's Get Legal with John Hanson. And, I love listening to him. He was great on the show. But how has that changed for you? As a solo for such a long time, being the chief of the tribe, has that changed?
Not really, because we both sort of practice in our own world, and we both kind of control our own clients and our own business. So even though we're seated close by and we're in the same firm and we get to talk all day long, it's not like we are really interacting from a legal standpoint. It's more like a legal friendship bond rather than an intermixing of law firms. And I will say that I have been in big law firms where there have been 200 lawyers, and that's something that I didn't like. There were too many egos, too many different people wanting to do things different ways, too many rules, too many meetings. And so we can still maintain the way we want to do our business, how we want to treat our clients, how we want to charge our clients, if we want to charge our clients, and we can do what we want without interference by any corporate body.
Well, that's interesting. And again, you've been in business a long time. I know I've had you on the show, and we've had an opportunity to learn about your background and that you were with these larger law firms and did some incredible work with them. And now you've been on your own for such a while. I thought it might be difficult to try to get somebody in, but as you describe it, it's a different, as you said, you're not working in the same cases, kind of working separately, but together. Is that right?
Right. And, I don't want to tell anyone what to do, and he doesn't want to be told what to do. So, we do our own thing. And, when you have good lawyers around you, they're self-motivated. They're usually very intelligent. They're usually very driven. They're very conscious of results. They care about clients. Most lawyers really are like that, contrary to all the jokes you hear. And so when I have lawyers, whether they're my associate or a partner, or, I just let them do their own thing. You choose correctly and you let them do what they do best. And, certainly I give guidance if I'm asked. I'm certainly, a person who I'll look over things and say, I think this might be a better way to do it. But I don't like to micromanage. I like to have people do what they think is in the best interest of their clients.
Well, I think that's exactly the way I work. And I'm not a micromanager. You want to hire people that know what they're doing and let them do it.
Right. They're happier too, which is good.
I don't know if you remember this, but I have two sons, and one is in law school. One is just finished, and he's studying for the bar. Do you remember when you studied for the bar?
I remember that summer. Oh, it was miserable.
Well, tell us a little bit about that. What do you remember about it? Because I'm trying to get, if you had some advice to him about how to study for the bar, what would you say?
Well, you got to put your time in and you got to be disciplined. I was working during the time at the big firm, so I had a lot of responsibility that was just coming to me as a new lawyer. But I was studying for the bar, and I had different rules about I'm going to get through this much material by this date, and I'm going to go over it again on this date. And I had a whole schedule that I maintained. And you got to put your social life on hold. I was outside of my home, so that was good. I didn't have any distractions there. And, I just kept to my schedule and really made sure I didn't cram at the end. There's a lot of memorization and a lot of practice exams that you should be taking, and take all those practice exams and then, learn from your mistakes and just keep at it.
What I've learned is times have changed. So he's in some program and it's got a schedule for him and how he's progressing. I didn't have that luxury, right? You had to kind of keep your own schedule, as you just mentioned, and kind of keep to it, and it was all on you. Anybody I know that didn't pass the bar, it's because they didn't study enough. Is that impression?
It's either they didn't study enough, they didn't take it seriously, because we do have a very high passage rate, but sometimes people just don't know. Aren't good test takers. There's a few people there who, maybe had like, ADHD, or back in our day, we didn't know what that was, but, dyslexia and the like. But I think now those people, if you qualify, you can actually get extra time on the bar if you do suffer from some of those situations.
That's true. I know with the ACT and all of that tests, they give them extra time now. But yes. back in when I went through, they didn't have that luxury, and most people, you didn't go to law school because they didn't make it through the wall that's there to let people in. So I like that. We could talk a little bit about the Supreme Court case and the student law, but first, again, I want to talk. As you mentioned, I have a son in law school now, and we talked about your partner and working with other attorneys. What's your impression about what makes a good attorney?
Well, I think it's a multi-layered sort of occupation. The first thing is you have to care. You have to care about people. You have to care about people you like. You have to care about people you don't like. You have to advocate for people who have made mistakes. You have to advocate for people who have always done good things. And you have to do that without regard for your own judgment of them. That being said, you're also a counselor. And if someone is doing something wrong and doing something to harm others or themselves, you should have the wisdom and the experience to be able to say to them, hey, I'll represent you, but you really need to stop doing what you're doing, and it's going to harm you in the long run. So I think you need to be prepared. I think you need to be very hardworking. I think you need to be articulate, a good writer, and you just need to have the wisdom to try to help people through a very hard time. As a litigator, we deal with people who are in a divorce. I don't do bankruptcy or taxes like you do, Steve, but when people come to you, they're not happy because they got a bad situation. And it's your job to get them through that as quickly as possible, as inexpensively as possible, and with the least amount of harm and stress. And if lawyers keep that in mind, that's where you're going to find a good lawyer.
Now, you mentioned you've been doing this for 36 years, and so that gives you a lot of experience about how to handle clients. Talk a little bit about that, about your relationship with your clients, and why do you think that's so important?
Well, I always try to, I generally like my clients. I generally feel for them. I feel empathy for them. And I want to get to know them, and I want them to get to know me to some extent. I like to know their background. I like to know why they're doing what they're doing. I like to know the reasons. I know a lot of times in family law, the lawyer will say, I don't care why you're getting a divorce. I'm just a surgeon. I'm going to just get you out of this divorce. That's not how I operate. I want to know the relationship. I want to know the relationship with children. I want to know the reasons that the marriage broke down. I want to know what your goals are in the future so I can try to get you to that point as quickly as I can. And so my relationship with them is generally pretty close. Obviously, you have to maintain some distance because they're not your friends. You're in a professional setting. But I think I step into the realm of becoming a counselor and more, in some ways, of a therapist, even though I'm not a therapist, of course, but trying to help them through the emotional part and the personal part as well as just the legal part.
I think that's so important. Even in my practice, people come to see me, they're having trouble and they're looking for a counselor, someone to kind of lead them away out of this problem that they're having. In my situation, that problem takes a long time to solve. And so you have to develop this relationship with someone. As in your practice, when you're dealing with family law, you're at the core of who they are. It's so important.
Everything's up for grabs. Your house, your belongings, your money, your spouse, your children, your future, your income, everything's up for grabs, and people are not in their best mind. And you have to understand that, and you have to understand that there's this inherent tension because they're looking to you to fix it. And while, as you know, we can't fix the biggest part of the problem, which is the breakup of the marriage or the non-payment of taxes or whatever, what have you, we can't fix it. We can just get you over it and get you through it. And so you have to understand that clients get angry and clients, lash out at people and do things that say things they shouldn't say. But you have to take that in stride and know that if you were in that situation, you might find yourself doing the same things.
Now, I probably know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask you. Do you enjoy being an attorney?
I like parts of my job and I despise parts of my job. I do like the intellectual challenge. I really, really like helping people. I like when someone, gets a good deal and moves through things and calls me up in 2 years and thanks me for helping them through and, sending flowers. Just had a client send me flowers because they were so happy with my representation. But I will tell you, it's tedious, and as you probably know, and things take a long time to accomplish. And I'm one of these people, I want results. I want to get things done. I want to wave my wand and get it done. But in litigation, these divorces can take 2 years. In fact, years ago, they used to take 5 years to get anything done. And that's just an eternity for people. So I think if I had to do over, I would probably get a law degree, but I probably would branch out and do some other things with my law degree.
Well, that's kind of the beauty of having a law degree. There's so much you can do with it. But again,
yes.
the profession would be losing something without you involved. I mean, you're a good face for this profession, and you're on television a lot and on the radio, and you do represent the attorney profession every day. Do you believe that?
Yeah, I mean, I was looking today on I keep a little book on all the media appearances I do, and because of all the Supreme Court cases, and we've got a bunch of heater cases going on, and the Idaho college murders, and I have my own radio show and a segment on WGN on Wednesdays, and all these things. I'm going to have probably a total of 12 media appearances this week alone. And so that's interspersed with my practice of law and trying to live a life and exercise and do all the things we need to do to stay healthy. So I am on a lot. I do a lot of the media stuff, and I really enjoy it. And I enjoy trying to explain things to people. I try not to get political because there's way too much of that. And I try to just explain from a legal standpoint what's going on so people can make their own informed decisions. I hate when people tell me how to think about something, and I certainly don't want to do that to people who actually listen to me and watch me.
Yeah, well, I know I've been on your radio show, and you've been on my show several times, and I know you like to be prepared. And, as someone who does a podcast, but generally about IRS stuff, but even just that, which is in my area, I have to spend a lot of time reading different articles and following the news, and it takes a lot of time. In your case, you're a legal analyst with things that really don't have anything to do with your own practice. So I know that takes a lot of time, doesn't it?
It does, and my since COVID, I bought an exercise bike and I put it in the middle of my living room because I couldn't go to the health club. And so now I have this new habit. We all developed these new habits since COVID, some good, some bad. And so I get up in the morning, 5, sometimes a little before 5, and I have 3 newspapers, and I have all my materials that I want to review and some emails I might want to return while I'm on the exercise bike. I read my 3 newspapers, I prepare for my media, I send my emails to my clients, and by the time I'm off the bike in an hour and a half, I've done a really good workout, I can have a nice big breakfast, and I'm informed for the day as far as the top legal stories. So it's kind of a multitasking thing.
Are you telling me you're reading a newspaper or you're doing it online?
Online. Yeah, online.
I was going to say that's kind of, but we still call it a newspaper. I guess that's, you and I do.
Right.
I don't know if they still call it a newspaper.
And I still say dial the phone, so. And play a record, so.
I understand, unfortunately, all too well. Well, I want to talk a little bit about, you've mentioned the Supreme Court, and tell us your impressions about this last term and the cases that have been come out. I've been pretty surprised at the mix of opinions and how some of the justices have paired up in these opinions. Kind of unusual. I don't know about unusual, but it is interesting.
Yeah, I think these last opinions in this last week have been astounding in that they've reversed long-standing precedent, which you don't see very often. When Roe versus Wade was stricken down last year, it struck down 4 decades of precedent. And you could see that the conservative judges were not having any of it, and they were going to overturn it. And that was along party lines or along ideological lines. I won't even say political lines. With the case that struck down affirmative action after 50 years of approving it, and Sandra Day O'Connor was the author of one of the opinions that approved of it, and she was a Republican appointee. You now saw the conservative justices strike it down summarily, and the liberal judges dissented. You see this a post office case where a worker wanted to be accommodated and not work on Sundays because of his religious beliefs, and the court sided with him, again, along ideological lines. So you're seeing what happens, and I don't think there's anything wrong with it or anything unusual about people who are judges are people first. They come to the court with their ideologies. Were they raised in affluence? Were they raised in poverty? Were they black-skinned? Are they women? Were they educated in public schools or private schools? And all of those things factor in to how they view these hot decisions. These are the core of our lives, abortion, guns, school, religion, First Amendment. These are core issues. And they are definitely going to bring their life experiences with them to the bench. And that's what you're seeing.
Well, I agree with that, but to take the other side, of course, when they came up with these decisions, those same judges did the same thing, right? They had their own opinions about the way life lives.
I absolutely agree with you, and that's why I think that if this court turns back to liberal, we're going to see these decisions flip-flop again. I have no doubt about it. I have no doubt about it, and I don't know that that's good for our country to see that this ultimate lofty court is political, but I think it is. I don't think there's any way around looking at it that way.
Well, I agree with that, but it's always been political, and it's a political institution, and that's just the way it is.
Yes.
But again, I've some of these not so drastic decisions have gone where maybe Gorsuch has been with one crowd that's not usual, and they've split in odd ways in some of these cases, but not based on politics or ideology, but more on how they view the law. For instance, Gorsuch is more of a constructionalist, right? He wants to look at the text of the statute and apply it that way. So I found that interesting.
No, I agree. And because, sometimes people think that the Supreme Court rules the way they want to rule because they like it or they don't like it. Do they like Biden's loan forgiveness? I don't like that, so I'm going to strike it down. No, they have to look at the statute. Yeah. There's an act that he went under called the HEROES Act that allows presidents to issue executive orders regarding student loans during national emergencies. Donald Trump issued some of those executive orders putting a hold on loans. So the question is not that did he have the authority, but did he overstep his authority? And that's what the court found ultimately. But again, people are thinking the Supreme Court is going, nah, I don't like this law. That's not how they look at things. Even if they do bring their ideologies to the table, they still have to read the statutes and read the law and the precedent to understand how they're going to rule and how they're going to craft their opinion.
Well, in reading your bio, I see that you were involved in the Illinois statutes with family law. Can you talk a little bit about that and your involvement there, and how did that happen, and how did you come about that?
Sure. Speaker of the House at the time nominated people in the family law practice, and also not just lawyers, but different people in the clergy and sociologists and psychologists to redraft the family law statute. And this was, probably 15 years back. And because it hadn't been retooled in a long time and it really needed to. And so I was one of the people he nominated. And so we sat in hearings and we talked and we divvied up the work. And one of the things that I worked on was to get the law changed so that we could have a no-fault divorce, meaning you don't have to prove someone hit you or is an alcoholic or abandon you. You don't have to prove any of that. All you have to prove is that there's irreconcilable differences, which merely means you're not getting along. So what we wanted to do is to take that out of the statute because it's contentious enough to get a divorce and to split everything up. We don't want to have people pointing fingers and saying you hit me and putting that in a public document that children are going to see. And so the part that I was responsible for rewriting was that no-fault statute. And I'm very proud of that, not that I did it myself, but that really did change the law in Illinois significantly, and I think helps people get through divorces without as much shame, embarrassment, and stress.
That was actually a monumental change, wasn't it?
It was. I think all states now pretty much do that, and it's the right thing to do. There's no reason to cast all these aspersions on your spouse. It's in a public setting. It's just very unseemly. And like I said, now when everything's online, the kids could actually go online and read all this stuff, which God forbid, you don't want them doing that.
I think you mentioned earlier that your cases are going about 2 years. They used to go 5. Is that directly responsible for this change in the statute?
I don't know that is, but I do believe that the judges are on tighter schedules and that the chief judges have like a time sheet, like what's your average case, and judges push cases along because there's a stigma for them if they don't move their cases along. And they're asked questions by their boss, hey, why aren't you resolving these cases? And so I also see that judges are much more active in trying to settle disputes. And even though judges are there to adjudicate, they do take it upon themselves to get the parties in and to try to mediate these things. Like today, I had a case in Zoom court and we're fighting. And I asked the judge, I said, can you give us like 10 minutes and maybe you can help us resolve it? The other side said yes. The judge said absolutely. And so we're all set to try to resolve it. And my guess is that instead of litigating for another year and a half, this judge is going to resolve it for us.
I like the way you just said Zoom court because it has changed everything, hasn't it?
Oh, it has. I think much for the better. We don't have to go to court. We don't have to spend as much time and money. The litigants don't have to drive downtown and park. They can be on and watch from the comfort of their home or their workplace. It's really one of the best things. It should have happened years ago, Steve. Years ago. Well,
I agree, and I think it was on the way, but it was going to take a lot longer than it would without COVID, right? It just changed things. I have to say, I help people with foreclosures, and they're having some financial problems. And the court wants them to take a day off so they could go down to town and probably do nothing and come back another time because they don't understand the process. And it just doesn't make any sense when they can do it over Zoom and save themselves the trip. It just makes so much sense.
Absolutely. It's saving people thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Absolutely. I know some of the courts have gone back to in-person. And as a litigator, right, you would say that a trial should be in person. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah. And especially in family law court, because sometimes when you're fighting about custody of children or you're fighting about parenting time, the judge wants to see the body language of the litigants. They want to see the reactions. Are these people who are calm? Are these people who are violent? Are they angry? And so you miss something with Zoom. You definitely miss something. You also miss something when we had masks. But now that I do see that judges, if there's any significant hearings, they are bringing them into the courtroom and again, able to watch how the interactions go.
Obviously important. And there's some things in court that you could do over Zoom and some should be done in person. And I like the mix. I know some judges in the bankruptcy court are having a mixed court that you can come in or you could do it online or however you want to do it, whatever best for you. And I think that's important. So, I had a client ask me recently, they were unmarried, but they had children. Can you talk a little bit about the responsibility of unmarried parents?
Sure. Actually, it's the same exact thing as being married, except you don't have the issue of property division or maintenance, which is formerly known as alimony. But when it comes to children, the issues are exactly the same. The child support issues are exactly the same. Parenting time, schedules, exactly the same. Decision-making for the children, exactly the same. So just because you weren't married, there's no stigma, there's no difference at all, and the cases proceed just like a divorce, except for how I told you.
Now I can answer their question. What other kind of issues are you talking about as a legal analyst? We talked about the Supreme Court. What other important issues are out there in America that you are talking about?
Well, there was a case in Chicago that I think got everyone kind of interested, and it was about a woman who was in a fast food place. She got into an altercation verbally with a man, and the man started to beat her head. The woman texts or calls her 14-year-old who's outside with an illegal handgun. The boy comes in and shoots the guy, and as the guy's leaving, he shoots him in the back again. Charges were brought against both of them, and then charges were dropped against both of them. And the question is, was this self-defense, defense of others? Was this, should the charges have been dropped? And I've been really weighing in on that quite a bit because it really pulls people in two different directions, especially when you watch the video, which is online.
Yeah, I have seen the case. It was a week ago, 2 weeks ago, but I haven't heard too much about it since then.
Yeah, the charges were dropped, and she filed a civil lawsuit against the police and the prosecutors. From my standpoint, again, trying to keep out of the politics of this, but defense of others and self-defense is pretty specific. If you're going to use a gun, which is deadly force, you can only use that force which you absolutely need to counter deadly force. And while hitting a woman in the head is a terrible thing and a crime, of course, and the kid could have gone over there and pushed him or maybe hit him with a stick, pulling out an illegal handgun when you're 14 years old and shooting someone, and then when the threat is no longer there, shooting him in the back, that to me is a problem. That goes from self-defense to some kind of manslaughter. And so I don't quite understand the dropping of charges, and the state's attorney has not been very forthcoming in making that explanation, which I think they should do.
Absolutely. I know when I was in law school, I took one of my first classes or papers I had to write was about self-defense. And I learned a lot about it then, and I never forgot it, which is, once the danger's gone, self-defense is gone.
And you've seen a lot of cases over the last year in particular where some young African-American kid goes to the wrong house to pick up his brothers, and a guy who's afraid because he sees a black kid takes a gun and shoots him, or someone drives in the wrong driveway and someone takes out a gun and shoots. I mean, I think that there needs to be a precedent set and a message to go out that if you have a gun, we all have a right to have one now. We're all walking around with guns. You need to know what you're doing, and you need to know when your right to defend really start. And, unless you are threatened physically in a way that's with deadly force, taking a gun out and shooting may put you in jail, and not to mention take a human life. So I think, people who have guns really need to do their homework and have some training on how to use it and when to use it. Agree
100%. And I think if you're going to carry in a concealed carry situation, not only should you be well trained like any other professional with a firearm, but you better have an attorney ready, and I really mean that, with insurance, because if you did it right, you're going to go through the legal system.
Right. Yeah. The insurance is getting better. For these things that they cover attorney's fees for criminal charges. They cover, to some extent, some civil damages and civil defense fees. I think it's really, really important, because if you're going to shoot somebody, there's going to be harm, and there's probably going to be something legally that happens to you.
Absolutely. And again, I think people take it too lightly, because you have a concealed law that you can just go out and get a gun and carry it. Because if you're carrying it, we don't want to use it, but obviously that's why you're carrying it, right? So you better be prepared for the consequences.
Absolutely.
Now, because you're such a media personality, I'm sure you have a lot of younger attorneys. Or can you talk a little bit about mentoring younger attorneys? As you know, I have 2 young sons, so I'm always interested. How do they get mentored, and what's your experience mentoring younger lawyers?
Well, I really enjoy that part of it. I taught law school at University of Illinois in Champaign and at DePaul for many years. I'm collectively maybe 15 or 20 years I've taught. And I really enjoy trying to impart some of my wisdom, to the extent I have some, and experience to the younger people, because I remember I felt like when I was out of law school, there weren't a lot of people who wanted to mentor, especially women. And as a woman, you can't act the same way certain men do in the courtroom. And so I was always looking to women to try to get some advice on how to, counter certain things that were going on, whether it's sexual harassment or being treated differently or being taken advantage of, et cetera. So I really feel like I want to pay that back and really help not just women, but everybody feel comfortable and, get a step up in this game, because it's a tough profession. And so if I can eliminate some of the problems that young people have as a lawyer, I like to do it. Like, we have people in our office all summer who want to come in for a couple days just to see if they want to go to law school. I always say, don't go to law school unless you spend a couple days in a law firm. Maybe you think it's going to be really one thing and you get there and it's not what you think. Or maybe you get super excited because you just think it's the best thing in the world. I have a woman this summer who's first year in law school, lovely clerk, and she can only come in one day, but we're trying to give her all the experience in the world and showing her the ropes and having her on Zoom court, introducing her to judges. And I think it's going to be an invaluable part of her legal education.
Well, I agree with that. Both my sons, they worked for me in my office before they went to law school, and I'm surprised that they still went to law school. I was not one that pushed them. I didn't tell them, "Hey, you should be a lawyer. Do this, do that to get to law school." I was kind of pleasantly surprised when they both decided they wanted to do it. Both are now working for a firm. When they were interns or clerks, I think they call them clerks now. My oldest just got a job with the law division in Cook County, working for some judges. So
that's great.
Yeah, he's also got been accepted to Northwestern for a tax LLM. So
fabulous.
Yeah. So again, but I think mentoring is. What's that?
I was going to say, I guess your wallet's still open on that one.
Well, it's true, but
just when you thought it was over, Steve. Just when you thought no more tuition payments.
Well, that's true. Although I got to say, they both did pretty well in law school with scholarships, so it was pretty easy for me. Well, Karen, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. Again, I think I love seeing you on. I listen to your show, my favorite legal show. No offense, John Hanson. Thanks so much for joining us. Do you have any last words for us?
Well, I hope everyone has a wonderful 4th of July and
Yes.
have a great summer and stay safe. And NASCAR is coming, and I have no idea how that's going to work. But I have a sinking feeling there are going to be lots of legal issues when this is all done.
Do you remember when they did the Formula racing here in Chicago? Do you remember that?
I don't really remember that.
Yeah, Jane Byrne had the Formula One, and they tried it for a couple of years in downtown Chicago. I don't know why it didn't take on, but it didn't. So now we're trying again with the NASCAR. NASCAR is more popular than Formula One.